Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is Genre Vision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And we are continuing Where Women Month, and we're going a little spacey this week with Species. Before we do that, just a couple calls to action first. We want to thank Tim for becoming a premium subscriber on Patreon at patreon.com/genrevision. Thank you very much, Tim. Tim now has access to all of the awesome bonus material we make over at patreon.com/genrevision, including a brand new series that we just started. This is called Pitch Party, and we actually uploaded one of the episodes for free at the Patreon page, and it's also in the regular Genre Vision podcast feed. This was Travis's episode on a Jurassic Park TV series, and we had a lot of fun doing these. I really enjoyed it, and we want to keep doing it. They are going to be Patreon exclusive, so if you want to get in on the fun, go over to patreon.com/genrevision and become a premium subscriber for just $5 a month. We also want to let everybody know that the final cut version of our alligator episode for FinFlix is going to be coming up pretty soon, right, Travis?
Yeah, in just a few days, you'll be able to hear the final cut version of our alligator episode in the FinFlix feed. The uncut version has been available on Patreon for our FinFlix and premium subscribers for a few days now, and it's a really fun episode. We encourage you to check out genrevision.com or subscribe to FinFlix on any number of podcast platforms.
All right, our Where Women entry this week is Species, a movie that was kind of infamous from my perspective growing up. It was always viewed as kind of very salacious because it was, that's the movie where there's a naked lady running around and she's an alien, and look at the poster, she's kind of nudie but turning into an alien.
This is the first movie I ever saw in a theater where there was a naked alien lady running around.
I mean, yes, so, plus 2 points. But Species has always been a movie that I feel like I don't even remember the movie itself fondly. More so I remember the marketing and kind of the aura around it more fondly. And it's a movie that both you and I have seen multiple times over the years.
Yep, I own it on Blu-ray from Scream Factory.
This rewatch was the one that I wanted to make a commitment because it's never been a movie I've fully clicked with. And I'm sure there were reasons I could have come up with in the past, but now that we're doing it for an episode, I think I've zeroed in on some of those reasons. However, that is not to say that Species is without merit. And one of the biggest merits I will give it is its opening. Now, I need to clarify. The actual opening, I wish, was not the opening of the movie, in which we show some satellites and stuff, and we get some text that says, yeah, SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, those satellites that are in Independence Day, that's a thing. I wish that wasn't in the movie at all, because the actual opening scene is far more immediately interesting and provocative.
Yeah, I mean, not only do we get a really incredible opening sequence that almost wordlessly establishes what we need to know for the movie, we also get a pretty dynamite opening credits sequence, like a legit old school opening credits with an overture by Chris Young. Hello, good score, really awesome cue.
I also, because this is a thing that we need to mention now, is I love the reveal of the title. I miss title cards so much.
It has a really great intertitle, old school animated intertitle that kind of reminds me of what they did for James Cameron's Aliens. It's a little corny, but you know what? I think it's beautiful work. And so we get, of course, this credit sequence and the little opening about SETI, and then we start to meet our characters. And we are in a laboratory, and inside the laboratory, there is this sort of glass enclosure where all these people in sort of like hazmat suits are working around it. And in the glass enclosure is a teenage girl, and she's played by Michelle Williams.
Extremely young Michelle Williams.
And she is looking up at a character played by Ben Kingsley, who is in sort of an observation chamber way above near the ceiling. Several scientists clad in hazmat suits or like Tyvek suits bring in a couple of canisters, and they hook the canisters up to this isolation chamber, and they start pumping in gas. and we see Ben Kingsley's character start to cry. And then we see Michelle Williams's character start to get alarmed and start to freak out. And this sort of interplay between these two characters tells us a lot about their relationship. It tells us about their power dynamic, with him being positioned above, looking down. Just that trade-off of emotional beats between the two of them is remarkable, actually. It's really powerful.
It's great because it's a moment that immediately gets us asking questions about, okay, what's going on here? Because we're dropped into the midst of a very critical moment in these characters' lives.
Right. And it's not building confusion. It's building mystery, and it's building the necessary sort of groundwork for this world. Like, more details will follow later when we get to the expository scenes, but just this little bit of information is like so critical and just beautifully set up.
It is. I really love this opening. She looks to Ben Kingsley and he mouths to her, "I'm sorry." And, they're gassing her to kill her. You're like, that's why I wish the SETI thing wasn't in there, because with the exception of knowing that what the movie's about, if you were going into this cold, you'd be like, what is going on here? This is bizarre and striking and scary and tragic. And of course, this character, Syl, currently played by Michelle Williams, as we talk about it, breaks out of the cage and escapes from this facility.
Pretty exciting chase sequence, actually. It's really well shot.
It's good. This is, who's it? Roger Donaldson?
Roger Donaldson.
Talking about the filmmaking just for a second. I think this is a good looking movie. It could be a lot better. I think sometimes its approach makes it seem a lot cheaper than it actually is, because this is a expensive movie just by the numbers. And I think the filmmaking at times accentuates that, but sometimes
Roger Donaldson is not the kind of guy you would look to be a really singular stylist, but he's directed movies you've heard of, like, the Tom Cruise movie Cocktail. He directed the Cuban Missile Crisis movie that was actually pretty good, called 13 Days. Mm-hmm. He made Dante's Peak, which was the Pierce Brosnan volcano movie. And these are all things that he directed, like, that were fairly close to one another. But he still continues today to have a career in film and television direction. But, it's not like he's a horror director. He's not committed to any one certain genre.
Right.
But Species has a look that I think is probably most similar to something like Dean Cundy's work on The Thing. It's very much that Carpenter anamorphic lens flare look, with a lot of like strong cobalt blues, really particular anamorphic lens look, and those big wide anamorphic lens flares.
It's interesting that you say that, because the vibe that I got more, and maybe this is just because of the time that it was released, 1995, this felt like a very deliberate response to the X-Files.
It's got like that Rob Bowman, like, X-Files movie look. Kind of.
Yes, that's what I'm not just meaning that it's aliens and stuff. I mean, even in the look and the approach to how this is all presented.
Totally. Federal agents, helicopters, all that. So many helicopters.
Yeah, and with the filmmaking not being overly stylish, grounding itself enough, but not in a way that feels, workmanlike.
Right. It actually has a sense of mood and gloss to it that is kind of, I don't know, unexpected for a sort of sleazeball movie like this is.
Well, yes, we'll get into the sleaze of it. Don't you all worry. We will get into how sleazy Species is.
Certainly. And I don't think it's necessarily an insult or a negative criticism to say that Species is sleazy.
It is just a descriptor. Exactly.
That's the fabric of this material. So after this really exciting and rather dynamic chase sequence, Michelle Williams' character hops on a train, like a freight train, and she kills a hobo. And there's this really strongly stylized nightmare sequence where she's almost in like a fugue state and kills the hobo without thinking about it. And this sort of nightmare sequence imagery would actually continue to recur throughout, not just throughout this movie, but also throughout future movies in this franchise. That's just a really common recurring theme, and it looks really similar in the sequel. Michelle Williams eventually hops off this freight train and gets on a passenger train. And Michelle Williams' character eventually undergoes a process that the other characters would later describe as a metamorphosis. We really haven't met our main cast yet. They haven't really become important yet.
Well, we don't even, I mean, other than the implication with the SETI bit of expository text beginning, we don't know what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, we know she can't really speak. She doesn't really have the ability to speak. But there's a lot of brilliant sequences early on where we see her character watching others, hiding certain things, and then imitating certain behaviors. So they do a really good job with this particular aspect to Syl, this character, throughout the entire movie, whether she's played by Michelle Williams in the first act or Natasha Henstridge later on. Like that, this whole idea with Syl watching and learning and imitating is really fascinating.
That continues up to a point. After a certain point in the movie, it kind of abandons that very particular and unique perspective. Because I will say, on this watch, I realized that is the most intriguing and I think compelling element of the story, is seeing the world through Syl's perspective and seeing particularly what her goals are and what she's going to do to achieve them by either mimicking human behavior or how she is learning particular things, how she's reacting to things she sees on television, all that kind of stuff. Every time the movie is doing that, I started to lean back in because I'm like, okay, this is intriguing. And speaking of Natasha Henstridge, this is the movie that introduced her, as the credits say. And I gotta say, I think this might be one of those secret performances that doesn't get talked about enough because of the perceived legacy or reception of Species. Natasha Henstridge is putting in a really good performance in this movie.
Yeah, she's not just being a model. It's not just a pretty lady that they got to pay to whip her boobs out on screen. This is a real, genuine performance from this person. She does a fantastic job with this work. And this particular story, taking such a grounded approach to her perspective and to be able to see the world through her eyes, like, it takes a certain performance to be able to convey the character's sort of wordless curiosity. And Henstridge does a fantastic job with it. Her sort of change, you know, once she's made the transition from being played by Michelle Williams to Natasha Henstridge, there is this confidence in the character that comes out. You know, Michelle Williams's character is very much about hiding and, fear, but Natasha Henstridge's character is about this sort of cold alien confidence. It's at this stage in the film that we should talk about the introduction of, I guess, the heroes in the film. Syl, exactly. As Syl is riding this passenger train and sort of preparing for her metamorphosis into Natasha Henstridge, we get introductions for our heroes, and that's Michael Madsen, Forrest Whitaker, Marge Helgenberger, and Alfred Molina.
I wanted to jump into the effects, but fine. We'll talk about the, quote, heroes.
I understand you don't like them, but that's part of all this.
Yeah, this is the thing. I don't think there are any good human characters as far as the main characters in this movie. And when I say that, I don't want to belittle the performances that are being put in.
Or the casting. Casting's good.
Sure, of course, these are all talented artists that we've seen in plenty of other stuff. And it's not that anybody's doing anything bad, but there's a twofold problem with this cadre of heroes. One is that they're boring. None of them, and what's especially frustrating is there is potential for them not to be boring. Forrest Whitaker has psychic powers in this. That he's an empath, which basically means that he can do whatever the scene needs him to do to, follow a certain trail of breadcrumbs or whatever. But it doesn't, like, this movie has somebody with psychic powers in it.
They're borderline psychic powers. They don't outright say that he is a psychic or reading people's minds. He's smart enough to understand how other people feel, but it's like it's
Deanna Troi from The Next Generation. Like he is,
or like Will Graham from Red Dragon.
I think the movie is very implicit in saying that he has extrasensory perception of some kind.
Well, I think Ben Kingsley's character does actually say that.
It is. I think there's an argument to be made that it's teetering on supernatural, but from my position, I think it topples directly over into being supernatural.
It's a bit woo. All right. For a movie that's basically like a techno thriller about like genes and gene splicing and stuff like that, it's kind of woo woo.
But that's fine because that's an interesting idea, but the movie kind of takes the least interesting path with that. And so that's one problem in there. So the rest of the characters, they're just very rote and boring. And the other thing is there's just too many of them that really don't need to be there.
Yeah, I mean, they don't come off as fodder, which is good. They do come off as like scientists, like or like potentially important, but that promise is never really delivered on. Like Michael Madsen's character is basically the man with the gun. He is man with gun who will do the shooting should shooting need to happen. The only potentially interesting thing about him is that he has a cat.
This is a stupid quip. And it's not even a real criticism, but I just have to say it. I also don't think the names of the heroes do them any favors.
Preston Lennox.
Like Dan Smithson. Like that's his name. And then you get to Marg Helgenberger. They give her the most white bread name. She's just Laura Baker. So that's not, but I think it speaks to the kind of uninteresting elements of these characters. Like you have Alfred Molina, fantastic actor, wonderful actor. He's
great character name. Ben Kingsley's character does get a good name, and that's Xavier Fitch.
Yeah, when they're always just like Fitch. Whenever Michael Madsen's like Fitch.
God damn it, your alien's now running around trying to fuck half of Los Angeles.
But these characters have a lot of potential, but the movie always pulls back on it to fall into this very basic and I think more widely accessible structure. Like Ben Kingsley should absolutely be having a Frankenstein arc in this movie. Movie does nothing with that.
Right. They do this amazing scene to set up this power dynamic between Syl and Fitch. They never fucking deliver on it. Syl just eventually kills him. Spoiler alert. And there's really no fanfare to it. But what does impress me more is what continues to happen with Syl. Like, we come back to Syl and she's on this verge of this transformation. She has a nightmare, and the nightmare is of this train that's going to run her down. It's this, nightmare of inevitability. And the train is a miniature that looks exactly like one of H.R. Giger's designs that he actually originally did for the Dune movie that got canceled, Jodorowsky's Dune.
Well, we have to talk about H.R. Giger because he designed not only that train, but he designed the alien form of Syl. And of course, he's a deserved legend as far as being a creature creator and artist. And that's why I want to talk about a thing that I like in this movie, which are the design elements and the practical effects. When Michelle Williams turns into Natasha Henstridge, she has this wonderful giant goopy cocoon, and the way that thing undulates is legitimately gross.
Oh yeah, it's really horrifying. This transformation sequence begins with a sort of classic werewolf style, almost sort of Rob Bottin style bladders thing. We see almost like worm-like shapes and bladders underneath her skin, on her hands and on her face, pulsating up and down. It's incredibly grotesque. It looks awesome.
And Michelle Williams sells it. The scream she gives when she's looking in the camera and these air bladders are pulsating off of her skin and breaking through. It's great.
And those appliances on her face are blended really, really well. And
it's very good.
And lit very, very well. You don't see that difference.
But then CG tendrils come out and you're like, oh, right. It's 1995.
Exactly. And the only problem with those CG tendrils is that it was 1995, and they just don't look good in 2020. So, they try to do what they can by pulling a gag because she's on a train and it's passing through a tunnel, like the light flickers on and off. And so you only really see half of the gag, but it makes you feel like you're seeing all of it. Anyway, so all these tentacles come out of her face and it pulls her up into a corner of the ceiling where she turns into this giant undulating alien vulva attached to the side of this train bathroom. It is just wickedly grotesque. There is a scene where the ticket taker woman comes in, and the ticket taker woman at first stumbles upon this huge mound of trash that Syl has generated from eating because she's been ravenous and, trying to store all these calories for hibernation and transformation. And this woman comes in, and this giant alien vulva is pulsating on the wall. I got to say, the practical effects were done by Steve Johnson's company, XFX, and you might recognize his work from Blade 2, like he did all the Reapers. All this sort of like translucent gossamer, like all the alien texture looks like rotten soap bubbles. You know what I mean? It looks like it would break if you touched it. But all like the fact that it inflates and changes shape, like it's incredible work. So this ticket taker woman comes in and Natasha Henstridge's arm shoots out and kills this woman in an instant. And then a very naked Natasha Henstridge falls out of this big alien vulva and the movie is in full swing.
This is, again, the most interesting element of Species for me is like when we're staying with Syl, when we're seeing her transformation, how her alien body works, what her goals are, which eventually we realize it is purely to mate. I think the movie is either working well enough or being really good. I think these are the moments that if you cut them out of the movie and put them together on their own, I'd be pretty invested in this movie. But every time we have to cut back to the X-Files structure of this team trying to hunt her down and always being 2 steps behind her, it's really, really disappointing because even when they're involved in these scenes, these human characters and there's interesting stuff going on, like they go back to the lab and they're like, well, this alien, because we haven't even talked about the origins of all of this yet, is that SETI was sending out messages to space, including the human genome, the DNA sequence for humanity. And they eventually got a response back from space. And the first thing they sent them was some kind of alternative fuel.
Yeah, clean burning fuel recipe from Aliens. That is such a strong element to introduce to your movie. Like, hey, the humans in this film have clean energy now.
Well,
they never use it, but whatever.
Yeah, such an interesting idea, but don't worry, the movie won't follow up on that because then the aliens send them a new genetic code, and they're like, "Oh, what is this?" So the scientists decided to imbue a number of human ova with this alien code. And out of all the ones that they did, the one that survived was Syl, that grew into this, little girl who also is blended with whatever this alien DNA is. So at some point in the movie, they're like, hey, let's go back to the lab and just create a pure alien code of this thing. It's not going to be mixed with human DNA at all, and see what happens. And it creates a goop monster. And the goop monster is wonderful.
The goop monster is really cool. It breaks out of its little petri dish and eventually turns into like this corkscrewing tentacle monster that grows up the wall. Like, it's a really cool series of effects. One of the things that Xavier Fitch, Ben Kingsley's character, says during this whole expository sequence where they're talking about the alien DNA and the ova, these embryos they created, he says, we decided to make it female so it would be more docile and controllable. And Madsen's character just openly laughs at this idea. And this is really, one of the first really strong pieces of commentary that the movie has.
Sure. It's not that this movie doesn't have stuff on its mind. And
it does.
When we get to the werewoman section of the episode, I'm definitely going to, because I think it has some very interesting stuff on its mind. However, I'm going to reiterate, I think it throws a lot of interesting ideas at you and then just completely discards them because it has to stick to this very formulaic structure that it's introduced with. Okay, we got to all hunt down the alien as a team. Like, aliens sent us clean energy. Aliens exist. Like, yeah. Holy shit. Like, this is huge. But because that's not what the movie's really interested in selling.
I just like that they're like, well, they sent this clean burning fuel recipe, so we know we could trust them. Like,
right? What? There's so much, because there's later a scene where Michael Madsen and Mark Helgenberg are just in a car and they're just like, alien life, huh? That's about
some shit, huh?
That's what the scene boils down to. It's like, I'm not saying that the characters all need to sit around and have existential crises about like, oh my God, we're not alone in the universe. What does this mean? Blah, blah, blah. But there are so many other creative, totally appropriate creature feature directions that you could take this material. And the movie is just like, no, nah.
Let me play devil's advocate here. The other side to what you're talking about is a situation like Prometheus, where it gets hung up on the questions and gets worse because of it. This movie, in addition to its like incredible sequel, is really just focused on executing the premise in a solid and dependable way. And I can't deny the fact that I think this movie just does that. You know, box checked. Like, that's it.
That's fine. It does not do an interesting version of that from the perspective of the people hunting the monster. The monster's perspective is interesting.
It's the only interesting perspective in the movie. In fact, it's pretty fascinating for most of the movie. Again, back to Natasha Henstridge. Fantastic work. Like, they saddle this character with the most important fanny pack you'll ever see in a movie.
Yes, this is true. But I also, as Syl grows and she learns dialogue, there's a moment where she's realizing, like, okay, I'm being hunted. And she has my favorite machination in the movie, in which she kidnaps a woman. And during this sequence, because I love when movies do this, which this movie did in its wonderful opening sequence, is it presents you with a very strange thing that starts you asking, like, where is this going? Not in a confusion way, in a curiosity way, because she kidnaps this woman, ties her down, and in front of her, Syl cuts her own thumb off, and it grows back because she has, I guess that's one of her powers. And of course it's horrifying. And then she goes and cuts the other woman's thumb off. You're like, okay, a picture's forming, but this is very striking, very interesting. And in that scene, there's a great line of dialogue. Maybe my favorite line of dialogue for Syl, who doesn't talk a whole lot in the movie. And it is, the woman that she has tied up says, "I wouldn't hurt you." And Syl says, "Yes, you would. You just don't know it yet."
Yeah, there's a really interesting perspective that forms for Syl about how she feels about humans through witnessing their behavior. And, you know, there's this cheesy scene at a club. Like, that club is straight out of fucking Batman Forever. It's really...
That's an insult to Batman Forever. That club is just... That club has never existed. Species Club. Well, like, what's the song that's playing on there in that? I can't remember, but it is just like the same thing over and over again. And there's like these really cheap rent, like street performer versions of Cirque du Soleil artists, like dancing around.
It's impressively awful. It's like this stupid bougie LA meat market garbage. Anyway, Henstridge is there for the first time. You know, where can I go to meet a man? And this motel owner tells her to go to the club. So she gets in because she's gorgeous.
Travis, what's the name of the club?
I forget.
The Id.
Sure. Anyway, she goes in and she's talking to this man. She's kind of eye fucking this dude. And this other woman comes up and starts, macking on this man right in front of her. And she's like, "I've got a party to go to and no one to take me." And, steals this man right out from under Syl. And Syl does not take kindly to this. Syl follows this woman to the ladies' room. And this other woman says, "Whatever it takes," right? So Syl goes to the men's room on the other side of the ladies' room and proceeds to rip this other woman's spine out through the wall. Holy shit. Incredible gag.
It's funny. I mean, it's humorous. It's gory. I wish there was
like that gag in Deep Rising where the woman is sucked down the toilet. I mean, the public restroom thing stands, but
I wish the movie had more of this, and we can't get into a tangent on Species 2, but let me just say this to clear the air. I adore Species 2. And I know, like you said, you're on the same page with me. And I think after seeing Species 2, Species is even less intriguing to me, because these moments, like the woman getting pulled through the bathroom, I'm like, that happened. That ethos is far more ever present in Species 2. And I wish that, as a very good effects movie for the time, that there was more of that in the original Species.
Agreed. I mean, one of the things that I think doesn't work about Species is any introduction of CG effects. And really, that's not necessarily the fault of any one effects artist or any one director. It's the fact that it was 1995.
It is purely, I will agree with you 100%. It is simply the limitations of the technology at the time.
Yeah.
And the ambition that is there, because we're going to get to bad CG in the climax.
Now, I took a screenshot of it in my notes just to specifically so I could remember what this thing looks like.
Remind you of the horrors. But I will not rag on it as just like, oh my God, this looks terrible, because there was even worse. I'm always going to come back to a movie that I genuinely like, and we've done on the show here before. I always go back to the CG reptile from Mortal Kombat.
Oof.
As a benchmark of like that never looked good, and like at all. And I can see in 1995 some of the CG in Species at the time, people being like, wow, okay,
impressive for 1995, but it's certainly it hasn't aged well.
I wouldn't go so far as to say impressive, but effective for the time.
Yeah, fair. That's fair.
But the limitation was just not there, and that's why there are smaller moments with some of the digital effects, such as some spines coming out of the back of Syl.
Yeah, stuff like that works.
Yeah, it gets by.
Yeah. So after she rips this woman's spine out, she decides to go home with her first man. And he ends up being a monster. And so she kills him by tonguing through the back of his head.
Very Alien.
Oh my God. It's a great gag too. The way the camera sort of pivots around to the back of his head to show that, that tongue coming right out the back is just a killer execution of a gag, man. This movie's got gags galore.
We learn more about her ever, growing powers, and that she also sensed that he might be a weak mate, to which they discover, he was diabetic, and that she's trying to look for a prime specimen to mate with. There is an implication, I mean, more thematically, that he's a scuzzball. But
it's not implied. It's pretty much directly stated that he's going to assault this alien, and so she kills his motherfucking ass. And then the next day, she's out walking around in Los Angeles and gets hit by a car. And the guy who picks her up seems, for all intents and purposes, to be a pretty nice, rich LA dude.
Real quick, because I want to say everything possible nice I can about this. Great stunt on the car hit.
Oh, yeah. Well, there are actually a couple times in the movie where she walks out into the street sort of not knowing that you shouldn't just walk out into the street. And she is almost hit by a car. I think it's before she gets to the motel in the movie. She is almost hit by that fucking car. And it's not a stunt double because you see it in wide and Natasha Henstridge turns around. It's like, damn, that was a really dangerous stunt. Holy shit. They would never do that today.
Nope.
That actually got my heart racing. That stunt looked so dangerous. But so after this, getting hit by the car and knocked down into the street, there's this nice dude who takes her to the hospital, and a doctor sees her clearly mutilated shoulder reform itself. This is a CG gag. I wish it were a practical gag, but it's a CG gag, and it's a morph. It's not great, but it's certainly not the worst CG in the film at all.
There is a good morph. I'll give the movie that. It's a little bit later. I won't say the context, but it is when we see Syl as we just see her eye looking through
that's a good morph.
Peephole, and she's in full alien form, and then she morphs back into a human. It's not bad, but it's also because it's very smart in limiting the amount of the effect we're seeing.
Agreed. Yeah. The elements of the morph actually match up close enough that it's a really smooth morph. So this nice guy takes her back to his house, and of course she is like super hot to trot, wants to mate with this guy, thinks he's the the potential father of her alien babies. I love
her delivery of just, I want to have a baby.
I want to have a baby.
Whoa.
Very forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll get to that, but I laugh at that, but another criticism I have to bring up is Species is pretty humorless.
It has its attempts at humor. In a couple scenes, Marg Helgenberger will be attacked by a squirrel.
I guess. I mean, to pull some of your vocabulary, I guess that's like humor adjacent.
It's joke adjacent. She says, "Fucking squirrel."
Sure, but But for a movie that's as audacious, the premise of this is audacious, and that's fine. We have no problem with audacious premises, but I just don't get a sense of humor from the movie. Even, I mean, like you're saying, there are few and far between moments, I think, of attempts at humor, either Mark Helgenberger saying fucking squirrel or Michael Madsen grumbling some offhand quip. But for the most part, the movie takes itself pretty seriously, and that's fine. I'm not saying that's in of itself a negative thing, but this is a movie about a killer sex alien who later will have just H.R. Giger breasts. Like, you're allowed to have a little fun with this.
Sure. I do think, however, that for as humorless as it is, and it's not totally humorless, or it's not totally devoid of fun, like it's executing most of what it wants to do fairly well. Like, I'm not saying the film earns its right to take itself really, really seriously, because it doesn't take itself all that seriously. There is this sex fantasy that Henstridge's character has about Michael Madsen, where they're on like a black stage with really dramatic lighting, and he walks through just a door frame standing in the middle of a dark stage, and he rips his shirt off to reveal his wife beater. Like, fucking hilarious.
Now, let me ask you something, because I was misled about Sill's abilities in this movie at times. This was one of those moments. Was this just a dream she's having, or is
it's a sex fantasy?
But or is Madsen having the dream at the same time?
I did not ever get the sense that Madsen was having Sill's sex fantasy.
Like, it is, because I was like, does she have some weird like dream infiltration? Because one of the things I like in the movie is that Sill dreams, like that we see the inside of her mind, and a lot of the times it's just these weird, very distorted visions of her eventual full alien self.
It's very Freudian, though. I like the sense that we are seeing this character dream. That's, you know, it's an inner, it's a door into her psychology. It's pretty cool.
I'll say it again. When the movie is focusing solely on Sill and her perspective, it's working. And these dream sequences, they continue to add flavor and mystery to the proceedings. So
this nice guy that we were talking about, she's trying to bang him in this dude's jacuzzi, and he's like, you're going a little too fast, and she's like, I want a baby, give me a baby. But meanwhile, this is intercut with them actually tracking her down, like they're really close to nabbing her, and it seems like he's going to give her away, this nice dude, so she kills him by strangling him to death with her titty tentacles.
Yeah,
titty tentacles.
Why isn't that fun?
It's not necessarily fun, but it is gross and kind of cool. Like, I like that actual CGI. I hesitate to call it a gag. Is it a CGI gag where you actually see her facial geometry start to distort? Like, they actually had to create some new 3D geometry to see her new like face bones poking out from under her skin. Like, for 1995, that effect is relatively impressive.
Yeah, it was definitely a selling point of the movie. I remember that being a big feature in all of the television and trailer marketing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So I definitely think they were proud of that effect. You know, fast forwarding a little bit here, after she kills this guy, that's when she fakes her own death by setting up this woman in a car. They get in this big car chase, which is, you know, I'm kind of like 50-50 on car chases in movies in general, because I think a lot of them are kind of, you know,
time wasters. Yeah.
Time wasters. And just, I think about Brian De Palma, who says he hates car chases because he's like, there's only like 3 ways you can stage a car chase.
Sure. I do like this car chase, though, because it eventually reveals her plan that Sill has been sort of keeping opaque.
Again.
And that's interesting. Like, it's a building of effective mystery instead of just having confusion.
Frame things through her perspective, and the movie is interesting.
Absolutely. There is, however, this one scene, though, that you and I disagreed upon interpretations of. And you said to me, Sill has mind control powers in one scene, and my reaction was, say what now, what now? Turns out it's a scene where she is watching the other characters from afar and reading their lips.
Well, she's reading one person's lips. It's Ben Kingsley. And the way that the shot is framed is it cuts back to her, and she's speaking at first, and we're not seeing Ben Kingsley speaking at first. And there is an eye light that they shine on her, which immediately was like, okay, is this, I like that. That's very formalist lighting in the moment.
Sure.
And she's speaking and she's saying, tomorrow night we'll go back to the club. And then it cuts to Ben Kingsley. And as he's saying the line, stake it out, she's saying it perfectly in time with him.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how this scene could be misconstrued. That doesn't, that doesn't surprise me. It's kind of, it's executed vaguely enough that it could seem like mind control because her powers are sort of ill-defined. I get that.
I would like to know because I just like to know if there's something on the cutting room floor, because the fact that it's specifically Ben Kingsley's character is like, is there some, like, does she have some of his DNA in her or something?
I don't know. For me, it just seemed to fit in with the rest of Sill's perspective scenes, in that all of Sill's perspective scenes up to a certain point are all about watch, learn, imitate. To me, that scene fits in the same template.
I mean, once you said that and I went back and watched, I was like, okay, I get that out of that scene. But the way it was presented was like, oh, she's making him say that.
The scene in which Ben Kingsley is Sill's puppet.
Yes, and which I was like, okay, is this another? Because again, her powers are ever revealing themselves throughout the movie.
Right.
And I was like, maybe she has some weird connection specific, because it's not like I was like, if she's going to do it to anybody, it's going to be him or Forrest Whitaker's empath character.
Because he's like borderline psychic anyway.
Right. But then nothing ever came up again. Then you told me that. I was like, oh, okay. So people, please just go watch that scene and tell me I'm not crazy, that it could be misconstrued that way.
Well, I think it can clearly be misconstrued that way because you know how to watch movies and you misconstrued it that way.
I think I do. I mean, I don't know sometimes, but.
So we got this big car crash scene where Sill tries to fake her own death. She puts this other woman's body in the passenger seat of a car. She takes her own finger off, like we said earlier, and leaves that as evidence in the car that is her, severed thumb, and she is dead and, can go on doing her whole alien mating thing. She has not really outsmarted the heroes because they all kind of suspect that she's still around, and they're right to do so because turns out Sill has dyed her hair.
Not only Forrest Whitaker is the suspicious one because he's got scene appropriate powers. He's like, I don't know, man, something don't feel right. And then they go back to the hotel or whatever, and that night they're getting drunk, and Michael Madsen and Mark Helgenberger are flirting and eventually have sex, and it's just like, I don't care, because I'm sorry, these characters are straight up bad. Like, just
the only thing I like about this sequence where Mark Helgenberger and Michael Madsen's characters bone is when he comes and knocks on her hotel room door and she looks out the little peephole and sees him standing out there and she goes, yes. Yes, I'm so psyched. This is exactly what I wanted to have happen. So I thought that
cool
was
for
funny.
her. I'm not, I'm not trying to be sex negative or anything here, but I just I can't give a shit about any of these humans. And I
don't care about them as people or even characters, really.
I think it's a fatal failing of the movie for me.
Fatal, really? Wow.
Yeah, because literally there's nothing. And it's more frustrating because you have good actors and you have potentially interesting characters like Ben Kingsley's Frankenstein or Forrest Whitaker's Empath. It's like those are unique characters in this particular genre structure. And the movie pretty much does nothing of interest with them all the way up into this climax, even to the point where we have Alfred Molina, who, I don't know, he's a anthropologist or something. It doesn't matter.
Shit.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, he's just eventually the guy that Sill fucks and he impregnates her.
That's it. And we get a quick shot of his gory corpse. I think they had to probably cut that shot length down for MPA reasons.
Maybe. The movie's pretty gory as is.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's why I say they probably had, we'll trim a couple seconds off of that if we can have a couple more seconds on the bathroom kill or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Let me get that spine rip in full detail.
Yes. But Sill has sex with him, kills him, runs out. Now she's pregnant. And they're like, oh no, if she births the male, who knows how many women it could impregnate and keep this going.
Right.
And so
I like Mark Helgenberger's like, she's an alien. She could lay 1,000 eggs. Who fucking knows?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we continue to learn more and more about the alien as it goes on. But this is kind of getting us into our final chase sequence, which ends up in some sewers. And this is shot pretty well. I like this interior.
It's very alien. It's Michael Madsen running around in like tunnels with a flamethrower. It doesn't look bad, but it's all just sort of like expected.
Sure. And eventually Syl does give birth, and it's appropriately goopy and well done.
Yeah.
And this, before we watched the movie, I kept I was like, all I remember is like a goopy kid. Like I was like, I remember there's a goopy kid, isn't that? And I thought it was Michelle Williams. It's like, no, that it's this kid, this male child that she gives birth to, who eats a rat with his frog tongue powers.
Totally. He's got a spike mohawk and shit. It's pretty dope.
Sure. So there's this kid who then eventually morphs into woof. I mean, I'm sure
he looks like a failed render of Spider-Smith from 1998's Lost in Space, or was it 1999?
Whatever year it was a bad year for CG monsters.
Bad vintage on CG monsters that year, folks. Don't uncork that.
And this is the bummer, is that this final showdown with the Syl child and Syl herself, it's mostly CG, and it's a bummer because this is an H.R. Giger design. I mean, it's unavoidably an H.R. Giger design, but when they show the actual practical suit and elements and stuff, they're smart to be kind of quick about it, because yes, this is just a person in a big goofy suit, but it's an H.R. Giger design, and it's great until it starts running around CGI style, and you're like, damn it.
Yeah, one of the things they had trouble to match, and this was just a limitation of the technology at the time, was that many of the pieces on the Syl suit were translucent. So they were a clear plastic or translucent plastic that had been airbrushed. So you could actually see through them, and light would diffuse through them. And to try and mimic that sort of translucent texture in CG for the time, and for whoever the effects crew was doing the CG at the time, was just not a thing they could do. They couldn't really do that.
Right.
So when you look at the CG monster of the male child, the boy alien creature, there's no translucency on it. He looks like a really poorly rendered coral reef human. It is exceedingly ugly. And then when you see shots of fully CG Syl, it doesn't look a damn thing like the practical Syl, because they can't emulate any of that translucency. It's a damn shame. And for the climax to depend almost entirely upon short shots of the CG Syl is a fucking shame. And, we mentioned earlier that Xavier Fitch just dies, and this happens during that sequence. He just gets yoinked.
That's it.
The monster just yanks him and he's dead, and you barely even see it. And it's like, well, one of the first effective sequences in this movie is building up this effective, this power dynamic between these characters. And just nothing, really?
Well, and that's through the entire, there is never enough of an implication from Fitch's character of the apparent love that he had for Syl in the opening sequence. That opening,
he's crying over it.
Yes, he's telling her, I'm sorry. Like he's totally bummed. But the rest of the movie, he's just like, oh, she's dangerous. Yeah. That's like his entire...
His accent is definitely a choice.
Well, yes, that too, but that's, Kingsley. So yeah, when he dies at the end, it's just like, yeah, he just gets yoinked down into the water, and then they come across his body, and he's got just like a little blood gag on his mouth. And it's like, well, okay.
He's got a pretty gory appliance on his face. They don't put it in like really close detail, but it's a nasty appliance.
But at the same, it's like, oh yeah, it seems like an affirmation of like, oh yeah, this movie has fallen victim to its formula. It has just become every other cheapy killer alien movie, and that's a bummer.
Right. It's just about executing a premise instead of delivering on interesting themes or doing
characters or emotions or anything.
Yeah.
And that's such a bummer, because all of that is there in the movie.
Yeah. Once Syl transforms fully, we lose what's interesting about the character.
Well, I mean, by the time she has faked her death, and then she has changed her hair color and is, stalking Alfred Molina. The majority of her perspective kind of disappears from the movie, and it's on autopilot to the climax. And it's like, oh, that's a bummer because her perspective's been the best thing about the movie.
Right. She's kind of hit a limit as far as like what she learns in the movie. And so the movie doesn't really follow up.
Well, she stops being a character and just becomes a monster, not just, visually, but in motivation and action as well.
Right.
And that's a bummer because yes, Syl is the antagonist, but she is also kind of the protagonist for a big chunk of the movie.
I disagree. She's not the protagonist. I mean, I'll argue with you on that. I mean, she's definitely an antagonist, but she's one that's actually incredibly complex for this kind of movie. And I really appreciate that the movie puts in, that amount of effort towards building this movie. I believe the screenwriter is Dennis Feldman on this, who also has a producer's credit. But I really don't know anything about the script other than that. But the fact that they put so much interesting work into building Syl as an antagonist and then kind of forgetting about all that interesting work in the climax is very disappointing. But to sum up my feelings on this flick, I'll always go to bat for this movie. It is a good effects film, a monster movie that I think in the end succeeds at executing its premise, but fails at the art of delivering on its themes or the more interesting ideas that it brings about. I mean, it's certainly not an intellectual movie, but it certainly could have been a more intellectual film had it actually dug into the things it was talking about.
I will go to bat for some of its thematic stuff when we talk about the werewomen aspect in a second. I think the effects, I can't call it a good effects movie, but I will say there are good effects in it.
Lots of good effects.
I'd say 70-30. Okay. Let's give it that. There's a majority. The majority of effects are more good than they're bad. I think there is so much interesting shit in this movie that it presents. And I think part of the reason that I can't come around to really going to bat for it is it drops practically everything interesting about itself. By the time the climax comes around, like I say, it feels like it's on autopilot, and anything that was intriguing or unique has fallen by the wayside.
I don't know. We do get a really fun rat puppet close up in the last few scenes.
Okay, I mean, that's something.
It's not nothing.
Well, it's goofy, and it's certainly a good, I mean, it's not followed up on, but it's a great tonal lead into the sequel, which is just a joy of goofiness. I can't go so far as to call Species a bad movie. I don't think it's a bad movie. I do think it is a tragically flawed movie.
Because it's just short of being good?
Maybe. Like, it's just, I can't even say just short. It falls short of being full on good. I guess, and by that scale, I would call it not bad. Because all of the human heroes, our team, I find none of them interesting, and any potential interesting things about them are abandoned. They are performed fine because these are good actors, but nobody is even there's not even an attempt to steal the limelight, which I'd almost welcome that in this movie.
Yeah, nobody's mugging.
It's not even necessarily needs to be mugging. If it needs to, Forrest Whitaker should steal the movie, and he could. He almost could, because he has such a unique style of acting just in general. But he never does, because the way that he's utilized in the movie is just kind of as a cog in the plot. So I still can't really get on board with this movie, but when it comes to the werewomen aspect of it and the themes that it does present, I think this movie is really successful, because the theme, from at least this is my read on the werewomen aspect, and our theme month, is that this is a story about the terror of the one-track, singularly focused woman. And now again, this is written by men, directed by men, so it's their particular perspective about the one-track, singularly minded woman. This is a woman who knows exactly what she wants, has one thing on her mind, one of the scariest things, especially for single men, which is procreation. It's not sex for pleasure. I think that's a really interesting wrinkle that I would be so great if the movie actually dug into, is that Sil is never approaching sex for pleasure.
Never. It's always about reproduction.
Even when she finally does have sex, it doesn't seem like a pleasurable act for her.
No, there's no close-up ever on Sil enjoying the act of sex as like a sensory experience.
That's such a fascinating wrinkle. It's only immediately after sex when she lights up and she says, like, I can feel the baby inside me, and she's smiling. And of course, I mean, from a sci-fi perspective, that's terrifying because it's like, no, you know,
It's a creepy line, yeah.
Yeah, well, Alfred Molina is like, I know some women think they can feel the moment of conception, all this, and she's like, no, feel it. And he's like, that's impossible. That's crazy.
That's when he realizes he done fucked an alien.
Yep, but this fear of the woman who that's all she wants, that she's just going to treat a man disposably as just a way to, you know, get seed out of him. I'm sorry, that's so gross what I just said, but it's a gross movie. Like, we didn't get super into the sleaziness of the movie in our discussion, but
this is about a fear of women who are using men as a means to an end. You know, and that is really what Sil is, you know, and I think Sil is an exploration of fear of women's reproductive freedom. You know, you have Sil as this character who has pretty much complete control over her reproductive freedom. She gets to decide what she wants. She decides what man she wants. And if she doesn't like it, she'll fucking kill you. She's strong enough. She is mean enough to mutilate the patriarchy. Not just strike it down, but tear it asunder.
Well, it's like I come back to it. It's this idea of disposability. Mm-hmm. And whereas from, you know, this is a very generalized thing, but, you know, from a male perspective, the disposability of sexual encounters with women is so much, you know, like that's a very common perception in heteronormative society.
I think men fear obsolescence.
Well, there's the obsolescence, certainly, but I think the idea of turning around and creating this monster who I'm just gonna fuck you for your seed, and if I don't like you and you fail as a mate, I will dispose of you.
The praying mantis.
Yes, there's certainly that praying mantis idea. Now, I will, this is where I got a little shaky about this after watching it, being like, the werewomen theme. Because while Sil certainly transforms throughout the movie,
yes,
it's not like her transformation changes her character or her motivation and arc. She's pretty much on that path from the word go, as far as she knows.
Right. It's a story of inevitability, and the inevitability is represented metaphorically by the train. You know, that nightmare she has about being run over by this train that's chasing her. I mean, that is the really direct metaphor for that inevitability of crushing you. I mean,
well, and the fact that the train isn't just a train, it's this weird nightmare skull-faced alien train. It is the embodiment of the eventual growth into this being that, as far as biological needs are concerned, her only reason for existence is to procreate.
Right.
And that's obviously, I mean, I think from a woman's perspective, that is an interesting fear to examine. Unfortunately, I don't think the movie has the correct perspective or interest in that, in examining that particular theme. I think that would be a fascinating theme to put upon a character like Sil, in that she is biologically compelled to reproduce, but maybe she doesn't want to.
Agree. Yeah, that would be a really interesting idea. And, you know, like I said before, like Michelle Williams's version of Sil before the transformation is a character we see exhibit pain and fear and dread. But after the transformation, we don't get any more of that. It is more about this sort of singular, cold focus. And that idea that after a certain point, you're only supposed to turn into a machine for procreation is a terrifying idea. You know, the fact that it's like, okay, the biological clock is ticking and this is going to be the impulse that drives you is something that could potentially take away anybody's autonomy.
Well, these are ideas that I wish were somehow present in the movie. For example, if it's not that Syl, let's say she does want to procreate like she does in the movie, and you say a biological clock is ticking, I wish there was an actual biological clock ticking element in the movie where it's like she has to procreate by a certain time, or maybe this particular, whatever being that she is, because she's not, I like that she is a combination of human and alien DNA, that she's not just an alien. She is a brand new life form. And if she was having to mate before a certain time, it's like, oh, I'm accelerating, growing at a rapid rate. After a certain point, I won't be able to procreate, and then I will just cease to have purpose or meaning or life.
Right. That way you'd actually get a sense of stakes for the character. Instead, I mean, this being sort of a more traditional monster movie, we're talking about like the stakes for Earth. And this movie doesn't really make a good case for the humans,
No, I don't understand why the movie does such a good job of creating sympathy for Syl in her very first scene, which is probably from an emotional, thematic character standpoint, the best scene in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a downward spiral after that of not really following up on that, because after a certain point, the movie has no sympathy for Syl. It is absolutely terrified of her and is begging for us to kill her. And it just feels, I don't know. I think there's a thematic argument to be made there, like you're saying, about when she becomes a woman, her confidence is what makes her so terrifying to a male-dominated society. But
and her ruthlessness at getting what she wants,
Sure.
which is perfectly captured in that scene where she kills the woman in the bar. Whatever it takes is what she says. It's like, oh, damn.
But I won't talk about Species 2. Maybe I'm going to soon in another forum. But before we switch gears here, I do want to say I kind of wish someone would reboot Species, because there is this. Stop remaking classic movies and look at a movie like Species, where it's like, this is a cornucopia of great potential that is mostly squandered. There's a lot more you could do with this premise.
Would you say it's fertile ground?
Okay, let's go to the shelf. I'm not going to beat that. The shelf is where we pick a movie that might act as a good pairing or substitute for our main topic. And we want to encourage you, loyal listeners, to go to genrevision.com and comment on the post for this episode with your own shelf picks. Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for Species?
Well, earlier I mentioned Red Dragon, and that kind of, Forrest Whitaker's empath character was designed on Will Graham. Well, Red Dragon and its sort of offshoots are my shelf picks for today's episode. As it turns out, Species and its immediate sequel, Species 2, are actually highly reminiscent of Thomas Harris's ideas about crime fiction and procedural crime stuff. Like Species and Species 2, both, they use these structures to build their stories in. So,
well, and like the Harris stuff, it's infusing those procedural elements with heavy genre horror elements.
That's right. So Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs are both monster movies, and they never let you forget this. So the story of Red Dragon with an FBI agent who is tasked with hunting a killer, but also has a close relationship to something that's imprisoned. Like these are captured in both Species 1 and 2. Like in Species 2, Natasha Henstridge's character is Hannibal Lecter. She's trapped in this like plastic cage the whole movie. It's a pretty interesting parallel to Silence of the Lambs. It's clearly not on the same level as Silence of the Lambs in terms of quality of art, but maybe it's not even playing the same game. Who knows?
I would beg to differ. Species. I mean, here's the thing. I was going to have Species 2 as my shelf pick just because everybody, please watch Species 2. I'm not coming at this from an ironic standpoint or anything. I adore that movie. I I really love it. And it's because of Travis that I, really sat down and watched it a couple years ago and just fell head over heels for that movie.
Yeah. Newsflash, that movie is total smut.
Oh, I mean, we didn't really dive into the sleazy perception of Species at the time. Again, we mentioned, kind of the marketing of it and stuff like that was very salacious, and it was pretty much sold on you're going to see a naked lady running around. But actually seeing the movie, in comparison to Species 2 is like, oh, we're going to take this sleaze to the moon, baby. To Mars, actually.
It's directly to Mars.
There is incest, twin fantasy shit in Species 2. Nuts. Anyways, that's not my shelf pick. My shelf pick is actually another sequel. And it's a sequel that immediately from the opening scene of Species, I was like, boom, that's my shelf pick. This is The Fly 2. Travis and I love The Fly 2. I've written about The Fly 2 for an outlet, Crooked Marquee, and how I think it's such a misunderstood sequel, and that its biggest sin is being a sequel to a remake that a lot of people consider it to be. I know. Last week I recommended both Fly, so I'm just continuing my shelf pickery on the same thing. But I really love The Fly 2, and The Fly 2 does a lot of what I wish Species did in terms of grounding the perspective from our main character, who is both protagonist and antagonist during, certain times in the movie. It is about a character that is raised in a laboratory and is accelerating. Their aging is at an accelerated rate, and eventually ends in a glorious effects-ridden goop fest. One of the greatest melted faces in all of cinema is in The Fly 2.
And one of the greatest crushed heads. Gag after gag after gag. This movie is gross, and it is awesome.
It's phenomenal. And I think the big weak link in that movie is the romance, especially in comparison to the Cronenberg version.
Yes. Also, Eric Stoltz's character is 5 years old.
He's 5 years old, but he's also Eric Stoltz, so that there's weirdness, but that's fine. I'm okay with weird. I'm okay with
Mel Brooks was like, let's take Spaceballs as Daphne Zuniga and have her fuck 5-year-old Eric Stoltz.
But again, another relationship that should be in Species that's in Fly 2 is the relationship between Martin Brundle, played by Eric Stoltz, and Bartok, who runs the company that houses him. And,
oh my God. Does that character ever get his comeuppance?
Oh, it's so glorious. And the relationship...
gross. So gross.
The relationship between them and the way it evolves and how it's revealed to Martin, the life that he's been living, it's genuinely good tragedy.
Well, the betrayal is palpable. It's almost operatic. I mean, that's one thing that, Howard Shore's score told us about David Cronenberg's The Fly is like, this is an opera. Mm-hmm. And that continues into The Fly too, about this is family drama. This is high tragedy.
It is.
And Chris Young, who did the score for The Fly 2, also fucking excellent work. That score is so awesome. There's a double album out there of Howard Shore's Fly and Chris Young's Fly 2 score. Fucking buy that album, shove it straight up your ass, digest it that way. It's so good.
It'll hit you more directly if you go that route. So The Fly 2, I think that movie deserves way more love than it gets. But let's shift gears here and go to our listener shelf picks for last week's episode on cat people versus cat people. Jetpack Jesus, interestingly enough, actually said that he kind of got a Species vibe because, there's a naked woman running throughout the movie in both of them. So
story checks out.
And then he also said, I wonder if Ryan Coogler's a fan of the Cat People remake because Black Panther has some tree shots of the Panthers in like the spirit realm that look a lot like that weird dream realm. And it's like, there's no way that wasn't on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably no coincidence that, like, I think those scenes in Black Panther are some of the most interesting. Mm-hmm. Like when T'Challa is talking to his dead dad on the spirit plane. Like, that's a really compelling scene.
Yep.
And that's actually, some of the most compelling stuff in Cat People.
Agreed. Stephen Nesbella has, for his shelf pick, he says, people turning into cat creatures, check. Taboo incest, check. Sleepwalkers for the win. Yeah, I did an episode of Chat Cemetery about sleepwalkers, and that's a movie I'll go to bat for, but it's weird. Mr. Milksteak had The Thing from Another World and John Carpenter's The Thing, two very different approaches to the novella Who Goes There. Yeah, I mean, we've recently, I think you talked about on one of the Currently Consumings, maybe our extended Currently Consuming, about The Thing from Another World.
And also Frozen Hell, which is the extended version of the novella.
Yes, very much. So yeah, I think those are another good comparisons between the original and remake. And then Eric Fuchs suggested 1993's Wide Sargasso Sea, which is based on a 1964 novel. It's an NC-17 erotic drama film set in 19th century Jamaica about a plantation heiress and her doomed marriage to a rich British nice guy who turns out to be a total scumbag. Never heard of this.
I have heard of it, but I've never seen it. But, now that he's talked about it, I should probably see it.
The fact that it's an actual NC-17 movie is alone incredibly rare.
I mean, it's rare, but it's not necessarily worth anything. I mean, if you want a real NC-17 movie, just go watch Last Tango in Paris and then gouge your fucking eyes out.
No, I mean, it's just very rare for a movie to commit to actually having an NC-17 rating, just for marketing and selling reasons. So there are very few actual NC-17 movies because most of them would allow themselves to be cut down to whatever an R is.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty arbitrary, but yeah, yes. NC-17 is incredibly rare. Witness David Cronenberg's Crash.
Yeah. So as always, thank you, guys. I love that we're getting shelf picks for movies as weird as cat people. So thanks, everybody. Let's do some Currently Consuming.
Nom, 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 nom.
Travis, what's been on your plate?
A couple moments ago, you mentioned something called Chat Cemetery, and I'd like to illuminate what that is for people. Chat Cemetery is a podcast, and it's hosted by Deanna Chapman, who does occasionally, I know, listen to the show. Hi, Deanna, if you're listening. Chat Cemetery is all about the works of Stephen King. It's basically chatting about pretty much everything that Stephen King has put out, whether it be a television show or a movie or a novel or a novella or what have you. You've been on this show several times. Also, Genre Vision family member Danny Ryan has been in the show several times. Hi, Danny. I recently listened to your episode on The Mangler. I also listened to your Sleepwalkers episode, which is a crazy fever dream of a movie. Holy shit. And then I also listened to Danny's episode on Misery, which is a great episode and actually has me listening to the Misery audiobook again.
Nice.
What a great audiobook that is. I've actually seen that live on stage. That's a good play too.
Oh, I've always wanted to see the stage version. Yeah.
I saw a local production of it at a small theater, basically like a small black box theater right around the corner from where I live now. And it was really fucking good.
I've heard the stage version's excellent.
Yeah, it translates really well. Anyway, that's all I got.
I will link to these in the show notes, but I had to review 2 new release movies this week over at Giant Freaking Robot. I saw Capone, which is most notable for being the feature film return of Josh Trank. And I also saw Scoob, the new Scooby-Doo animated movie. Real quick, I mean, you can go read my reviews for my full thoughts. I thought Scoob was okay. I do have an affinity for the Scooby-Doo cartoon and the Hanna-Barbera universe of characters. I think that Scoob is kind of trying to fit the property into something more currently widely acceptable, which is superhero stuff and a very particular adventure style, which it's not unsuccessful at doing that, but it kind of diminishes what makes the Scooby-Doo characters and brand and everything unique. Because the movie does eventually go to supernatural places anyways. But it's not all bad. I had quite a few giggles, and they recreate the entire opening of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?
That's cool.
It's pretty cool. Like I couldn't help but like light up when they did that. I was like, oh, they're doing this. And I was like, and the song, I can't remember who covered the song, but it's a very good, straightforward, fun cover.
I mean, that's going to hit a really specific nostalgia button, and it's going to hit it really hard. I mean, even for me. So,
Yep, exactly. And I think I don't want the movie to totally be that. But when it's doing that, my header was basically, it works when it can be Scooby-Doo. When it's being Scooby-Doo, the characters, they get the characters right. They're fun. They have some fun twists. Like Fred and Daphne aren't really in a relationship. Instead, Fred is in love with the Mystery Machine, which is very fun.
Okay.
I mean, it's played very, very cute. It's a good kids movie, and it's like a not bad Scooby-Doo movie.
Okay.
Capone is fucking weird.
The only reason I have not rented this movie yet is that it's a $10 rental, and I'll rent it when it's a $4 rental.
Yeah, wait on it. I don't think it's that interesting, but as a return for Josh Trank, my argument in the piece, and I said to you, is that I think Josh Trank is a skilled horror director that keeps getting stuck in movies that aren't perceived as horror. And that is certainly the case with Capone. Capone is a straight up hallucinatory horror movie about the final days of Al Capone when his body is being riddled with neurosyphilis and he's going fucking crazy.
I mean, I have not read anything about this movie that is uninteresting. I've heard stuff about it that's like super weird and sounds kind of bad, but it's all kind of interesting. Like I'm fascinated.
I think it is such a deliberately anti-gangster film.
I love that.
Which is, yeah, I mean, that's part of what I think would appeal to you specifically, because you're not really into the gangster stuff or crime stuff that follows a very traditional formula.
Yeah, it's got to be some sort of variation.
Yes, and this one, it really is kind of a walking nightmare for most of the movie, literally. And there's stuff that doesn't work. I think the limitations of the budget hamper Trank both as a filmmaker and just kind of production wise. Tom Hardy, I call him, like he's doing his goblin thing where he's just
his voices, man, him and his fucking silly voices.
I had to put the captions on, like, cause I was like,
of course it's a Tom Hardy movie.
Yeah. I can't understand him. And that's just how he rolls, I guess.
Yeah, me back. San Francisco, we got Beversite.
But I think the reaction to it seems to be pretty split right now, leaning towards negative, because I think when people see, it's so interesting. The original title for the movie was Fonzo, because they call his, Al Capone's name was Alphonse, so his close friends and family call him Fonz. And Fonzo actually being a weirdo title is much better than Capone, because you see Capone, you're like, oh, Al Capone, gangster story, got it. It's not this movie. This movie is all about Capone's paranoia.
It'd be like calling your movie Dillinger, you know what I mean? Like, people would have an expectation.
Right, which of course, I believe the Peckinpah made that movie. And I think people are seeing it and being like, this is not what I want out of this story. There's some reads that I made on the movie that I think, because this is written, edited, and directed by Josh Trank. This is him. Like, there's no question about it. This seems pretty unfiltered, the story that he wanted to tell. And there are definitely metaphors that I allude to in my review about who and what I think Capone is supposed to represent, who's Trank's kind of proxy in the movie is. I feel pretty strongly about that, considering the end of the movie.
Interesting.
It's an interesting movie. I can't say it's a good movie, but it is an interesting one. And one I think, given a few years, I think people will look back and like, that was a swing. It might have been a swing and a miss, but it was a swing. And especially for him coming back from the seemingly career-ending failure of Fantastic Four, I want to know what he's going to do next. I want to kind of be in that dude's camp as far as an artist, as somebody who has an interesting take on things and a vision. He's got that. It may not be a lot of times what people want out of what he's doing, but it's not what a lot of other people are doing. It feels unique, and that's special.
I'm sold.
And we're going to wrap things up here with our
Comment of the Week.
We actually wanted to feature Eric Fuchs again because we were very in love, I think, with the 1942 Cat People. I think it's fair to say that. But Eric was not. He said, I kind of don't like 42 cat people. I love the bus jump scare. I think the pool scene is stronger in the original version. But the version of Oliver, the kind of main romantic male character, is, according to Eric, a fucking asshole. I can't help but read that guy as a jerk-off who can justify abandoning Irina because he was a nice guy for a few months. He's bland and arrogant in a way only a handsome white guy in a 40s movie could be. If he had gotten eaten, I'd probably like the 1942 movie more. Here's the thing. I don't disagree with you, Eric, but I think, considering, the commentary that we talked about in that movie in relation to the Hays Code and what it had to abide by, I think the movie's on your side.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about the 1942 Cat People is that the three main characters, Alice and Oliver and Irina, they're all really complicated people. They're all not all good, not all bad. There's no heroes and villains. It's all just sort of damaged, interesting people. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, Oliver is certainly a bit of an asshole.
Oh, yeah, and deservedly so. I think there was an essay I read about it where it says that when he walks onto the screen, when he's introduced, you expect a bald eagle to fly in and perch on his shoulder. That he's just, he is such a cartoonish version of what the perfect white Christian American boy should be. And I think the movie is clearly on Irina's side for the most part. Mm-hmm. I think it wants to see things through her perspective and empathize with her conflicts much more so than Oliver.
Sure.
And so in comparison with the 82 version of Oliver, I feel a lot more, I don't know, conflicted in a bad way about, because of course, Eric also says that the kitty didn't need to die in the 42 Cat People. I'm like, well, unfortunately, because of the Hays Code, yes, it did. These characters had to be punished according to this code. You could not potentially leave any reading of a film where a supposed villain character, which I'm sure the Hays Code looked at Irina as the villain, would live. They had to be punished in the end, preferably by death.
Yeah. Eric also dropped a really fun nugget of European history. He says, the Mamelukes never invaded Serbia as Irina describes. That was the Ottoman Turks. This bugs me. Thanks, Eric.
Little history for you.
Now you know.
Yep, and knowing is half the battle. So thanks, as always, everybody, for the comments. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back next week to continue Where Women Month with, what are their names? Moorhead and Benson's Spring, the follow-up to one of my favorite little discoveries of the last decade, Resolution. Please watch Resolution. Love that movie. Also watch Spring because I know Travis has seen it before. I have not, so this is a first viewing for me. So check out Spring and come back next week when we talk about it to continue Where Women Month. As always, we want to thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Deitch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we'll see you next week.
Right here on Genre Vision.